25th Knesset has been sworn in on a historic day in Israel, not just inside the Knesset, but also outside of it. Negotiations are still ongoing for a Netanyahu-led coalition, with reports that talks with far-right religious Zionism leader Bezalel Smotrich has halted, supposedly about Smotrich's demands for the defense minister role. And Netanyahu has yet to announce his public securities minister role, a portfolio wanted by Itamar Ben-Gvir. And the issue of security has definitely become prevalent today, as around 40 miles away from the Knesset, a car ramming and stabbing attack occurred in Ariel, an Israeli settlement in the West Bank, killing 3. And with Ben-Gvir claiming attacks like this is why his party has become the 3rd largest party in the Knesset, do both himself and Smotrich have a good chance to hold Netanyahu ransom for these roles? Will Netanyahu finally create an Israeli government with stability? Will the opposition do enough to hold the right-wing coalition to account? What will the 25th Knesset look like?
Okay, gentlemen, so let's get to it. What will the 25th Knesset, or Israeli parliament, going to look like? As always, we begin with this quick fire round of 30 seconds each, and we pick up the conversation right after. So, Amir Whitman, please take the lead.
Well, there is no Knesset. There is only the executive branch, only a government, because the opposition is not a real force. And the various parties in the coalition have strict discipline over their members, partly as a lesson of what happened in the Bennett-Lapid government. So the Knesset members are mere puppets.
Well, discipline is key. We know that all over. Amir Whitman, now your 30 seconds are on.
Well, I think that the people of Israel is tired after almost 4 years of incessant campaigning. And it's one election after the other, 5 rounds of election, one after the other. Everybody is exhausted. And therefore, I think that there will be a government soon. And I think that this government will be stable and will more or less come to the end of its time, so that it will have time and a mandate to implement the policies it wants to implement.
And we will get to policy in a second. Last but not least, Mohammed Aravshe, your take?
Well, I think that we are up for 2 types of governments. The first government, with the first few months, will be basically serving Benjamin Netanyahu's personal needs, all of the legal procedures that he needs to try to escape legal matters that he has with the court. And for that, he will be actually hostage of the extreme right wing in Israel, and he will be probably delivering everything that they want. The second stage, once that is over, I think that Benjamin Netanyahu might actually seek a different government, a government that is more centrist in its approach.
Interesting, and we'll get to this two-phase government you're suggesting, Mr. Dawawshe, in a split second. And from this point onwards, please feel free to interact, gentlemen. I would like to begin with theorizing. If Ben-Gvir, Itamar Ben-Gvir, that is, from the far-right Jewish Power Party, was indeed Internal Security Minister today, as he desires, and Bezalel Smotrich, leader of the Religious Zionism Party, was indeed Defense Minister today, as per his desires, would we see any different reaction to the terrible terror attack earlier today? Mr. Whitman.
Well, of course.
Okay, Mr. Oren, take the lead, please.
Of course not. The reality on the ground is blind to the various changes, the vagaries of Israeli politics. There are deep roots to what is happening there, the friction between the inhabitants, the Palestinians, and the settlers, as well as the security forces. And in one way or another, we will see this sort of resistance or terror. It depends on one's point of view, and it doesn't matter even if Ben-Gvir becomes prime minister.
Mr. Whitman, we have seen the far-right parties campaigning on this very topic until not so long ago. Do you think that the campaigning rhetoric will actually materialize into policy making?
Well, first of all, it's clear that Arabs have been attacking Jews for well over 140 years now, since the Jews started coming back to the land of Israel. So this is not going to stop whoever is in power in Israel. That's clear. Having said that, policies of the Israeli governments do have influence on what is happening, and we can see that, generally speaking, when the left is in power, there tends to be more violence because they are doves and they have a way of answering to terror attacks, which is encouraging these terror attacks. So you need to be strong, and you need to show resolve. You need to do what Jabotinsky called already 100 years ago an iron wall. So I think and I hope that this government will be able to strengthen the iron wall of Israeli resolve and incentivize Arab terror. Whether it's going to happen or no is yet to be seen, but I think that's what this government is going to try to do.
Well, speaking of incentives, but on the flip side, if you will, Mr. Daraushe, alluding to what, or echoing rather what you were alluding to, should Benny Gantz join Netanyahu if offered to maintain or retain the defense portfolio? This is a speculation that had been thrown up in the air, perhaps as a trial balloon, so to speak, but taking into consideration the situation on the ground and the fact that Netanyahu might not necessarily want to be the leftist mark of his own coalition, do you think Benny Gantz should be doing such a move?
Well, before I answer that, let me just attend to the first point that was raised. I do think that a more right-wing government will ignite more violence on the ground. We saw Ben-Gvir's celebrations of violence in May 21. I think his mere presence of trying to celebrate and dance on the violence circles brings in more and more rounds of confrontations. And unfortunately, my expectation is that such a rule of Ben-Gvir and Smotrich being the leaders in the government might actually cause maybe even a third round of intifada-style violence in the West Bank and Gaza, and God forbid also in some of the towns inside the state of Israel. And that's why I do think that for what's better for the country is, yes, for Benny Gantz to join a government to try to scale down the extremism that the extreme right brings into the formula of a new coalition. But that will be, in a sense, some kind of a suicide for Benny Gantz. Benny Gantz has paid the price of partnering with Benjamin Netanyahu once and failing to get the results that he wanted from that partnership. So I think if he does it again, maybe it will be good for Israel. As I said, it sort of calms down the situation a little bit and puts in a more responsible figure in the Ministry of Defense, but that will be political suicide for Benny Gantz himself.
But Amir Oren, try to mend the gap for us. Mr. Daraushe is suggesting that Ben-Gvir and Smotrich will create provocations, but at the same time, we're hearing from Mr. Whitman that there'll be no significant change in policy when it comes to security matters. And adding to this boiling pot already, an American pressure on Netanyahu not to give Smotrich the defense portfolio. So maybe there's a whole lot of talk here, but little prospects of action?
Well, no single minister can change government policy. There is the inner security cabinet in which each minister has one vote. Perhaps the prime minister can override if it's 50-50. But nevertheless, Ben-Gvir would not be able to impose his will on the police, including the border patrol, because they are subject to the law. And Smotrich, even if he becomes the defense minister, cannot impose his own will on the IDF brass, the senior officers who are, by law, the sovereign in the territories. But this is not probably what Smotrich and Ben-Gvir have in mind. They want to blame Netanyahu for failing to let them fulfill their own campaign pledges. So they may bring the government down after several months in order to gain more power in new elections, early elections.
And Mr. Whitman, we're seeing different levels of more explicit, less explicit pressure, American pressure on Netanyahu, again, not to give the defense portfolio to Bezalel Smotrich. Is the U.S. overstepping the line here?
Yes, entirely. This is really unacceptable. I think, with all due respect, and the United States are our closest ally and the most important ally, of course, yet it's none of their business to say who is going to get what portfolio in Israel's government. We are a democracy, we're a sovereign country, and we should respect the will of the people, and the negotiations for who is going to get which portfolio should be held among the parties which are going to be part of the coalition. This has nothing to do with the Americans, and the role of the Americans in that respect is to deal not with who gets what, but with the Israeli government and what policies it is promoting. And they have, of course, the full right to say that they can agree or disagree with some of the Israeli government's policies, but it's none of their business to interfere in coalition building and saying, this or that party should get this or that portfolio. It's really, really chutzpah, I would say.
Chutzpah, our Jewish audience will definitely get that. After the break, Amir, because we do need to take a quick break now, but we will continue our debate and drift away from security for a bit. There are other topics on the agenda, believe it or not. Right after Amir Whitman, Mohammed Arabshe, and Amir Oren, you're all staying with us. A few minutes break, and we're back with the rest of the summit. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the summit. Still with us, Mr. Mohammed Arabshe, Amir Whitman, and Amir Oren. Thank you, gentlemen, for staying with us. We're also staying on topic, but before we dive back into the conversation, let's take a listen to outgoing Prime Minister and incoming opposition leader Yair Lapid in today's swearing-in ceremony.
I had a speech prepared about what we did in the Knesset over the last 18 months, but I will not be saying what I wanted to say because of those events. I just want to say that the 25th Knesset will be a place where people can speak their opinions, but not a place where everyone just wants to insult one another. We need to make sure that this place, this establishment, will be a place where Israelis look up to, not a place that Israelis are ashamed of. They're ashamed of the representatives. It is our task. That will be our goal, and I certainly hope that we will achieve it. Thank you very much.
So let's get to it. From coalition talks to the opposition benches. After all the bad blood and mutual accusations for the failure to win the elections, can the opposition get its act together and act together? Mohammed Arabshe, your 30 seconds are on.
Well, it's not really that easy. We are seeing that they're starting on the left foot when they tried to create a meeting for all of the opposition factions, all the different parties. They chose to exclude the Hadash and the Arab Movement for Change. That's a bad start. And we also see some fragmentation and discussions between Benny Gantz and Yair Lapid. I don't think they finished their competition, and that's why we might see some different kind of coalition that is not cohesive together.
Yeah, coherent opposition is as important as a cohesive coalition. Amir Whitman, your take?
Well, it's clear that opposition is diverse. I mean, there are parties which are, our parties, center-left parties, different parties, so they are different. Yet, at the end of the day, the majority is relatively large, 64 coalition to 56 opposition. I don't think they're going to have so much power to block the initiatives of the coalition anyway.
Last but not least, Amir Oren.
Netanyahu wouldn't have managed to topple the Bennett-Lapid government if he didn't have the 4 votes of the Arab joint list. So this was a diverse opposition because of the sheer hatred of these Arab politicians towards their colleague and former partner Mansour Abbas. Now, perhaps Lapid and Gantz could this time around agree on a rotation for opposition leader.
Rotation for opposition leader, not just over the premiership. That's interesting. And please feel free to interact from this point onwards, gentlemen. Let's just try for a single moment to discuss policy and not just politics. Among the many portfolios up in the air at the moment is the finance ministry. Both Aryeh Deri, the leader of the ultra-Orthodox Shas party, wants the role, and Bezalel Smotrich, as we mentioned earlier, in the context of the defense portfolio, is in the race as well. They have completely different financial or economic outlooks. Smotrich is essentially a libertarian, and Deri cannot be more of a socialist. So is policy a non-topic here at all in this game of chairs, Mohammed Darawshe?
Well, I think in either case, the real finance minister will be Benjamin Netanyahu. He prides himself to be the magician in the field of finance, and I do not think that he will give either Aryeh Deri or Smotrich, no matter which one of them actually assumes the position, the glamour of being the ones that lead the finance policy that is leading Israel into more socialist or more libertarian. I think Netanyahu will continue to be Netanyahu as a financial leader of the state of Israel. He's done some good things in the past, and I think he wants to take more credit in the future for some kind of financial directions. And I think in either case, he will be the balancing actor in this case. So if it's Aryeh Deri, I think that Netanyahu will be more market-oriented. If it is Smotrich, then Netanyahu will be more social-oriented and more welfare-oriented.
Playing the part according to the leading figure. Amir Whitman, I'm curious to hear your take, the head of the Libertarian Caucus at Netanyahu's Likud party.
Yeah, no, so we are extremely concerned with Aryeh Deri getting the finance minister. Now, I agree with Mr. Darawshe that, yes, Netanyahu will probably be playing the balancing act here. And yet, whoever gets the position will have influence. Let's not kid ourselves that the finance minister of the state of Israel is just a puppet. It's not the case. So we are extremely concerned and worried that Aryeh Deri, who's a far-left, populist, socialist politician, will actually get the finance minister. I think he's going to cause damage, and he's not going to promote what needs to be promoted so that Israel succeeds and is a wealthy and successful country. So we are extremely opposed to Aryeh Deri getting this job. We would be happy for anyone from the Likud to get the job, or alternatively, if this is not possible, then for Smotrich.
I'm sure Likud members will indeed be happy to get the portfolio for their own party. And speaking of which, Amir Oren, another high-profile portfolio, the foreign ministry. Netanyahu speculated to try and allure former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Ron Dermer, to assume the job, not just potentially angering some Likud members, but also not making everyone on Capitol Hill too happy.
Well, you are alluding to the fact that Ron Dermer, who came from the Florida Republican Party when he emigrated to Israel and went back to Washington as the Likud emissary to the Grand Old Party, having angered the Democrats. This is not really an important portfolio. The foreign ministry has fallen out of favor. It is almost useless. However, Netanyahu wants to have his special personal emissary the way he used Yitzhak Molcho when he could. So having a foreign minister as his emissary could serve. However, he doesn't have too many portfolios to share with his Likud supporters, and there's only so much that they are willing to suffer, even though they showed that they can be very, very servile.
And Mr. Darawshe, another hot button topic, the judiciary reforms vows at least. Mere talk, or are we nearing an actual revolution? Or let me rephrase, is there any way to bypass the lack of constitution?
Well, I mean, Israel has bypassed the lack of constitution for the last 75 years, and it tried to compensate for that by some basic laws that seem to be even contradicting with each other. And that's why the Supreme Court was appointed to be the one that makes that kind of balance, to make sure that no laws will contradict some of the basic laws that guarantee Israel's democratic nature. And the real fear is that the wave of constitution that might be coming in the next few months might actually reduce the power of the Supreme Court, which has been trying to make sure that the Knesset does not really become too powerful, and that there is a separation of authorities, proper separation of authorities that guarantees that kind of balance between the three different authorities in the country.
Or excessive,
it seems that there is some kind of a hunger among some of the members of the Knesset, those that have legal files from one end and those that have certain agenda, whether it is nationalistic or whether it is religious agenda that they want to impose it on the rest of Israeli society.
Or an observation of an alleged excessive power on behalf of the Supreme Court. Amir Whitman, in a really yes or no answer, we're running out of time. If indeed materialized from annexation to the judiciary, will a right-wing government actually execute right-wing policies? Yes or no?
Well, in terms of judiciary, yes, I think there's way too much public pressure for nothing to happen. So it will happen. To what extent is, of course, yet to be seen, but there will be reforms.